I would like to give a thank you, first of all, to Mary Jo Worsko, who did the heavy lifting on this presentation, is giving me the honor of presenting it to you all today. She will join me later for the Q&A if we have time. First of all, this is the name of this presentation is Building Retrofits, Basics and Benefits. I am Henry Love, the Principal Director of Municipal and Community Programs at Elevate. So first off, thought the R2E2, we went over some of this, but it's the Residential Retrofits for Energy Equity. It's a nationwide initiative that will provide training for state and local tribal governments, community-based organizations, jumpstart energy upgrades for affordable housing that will lower utility bills, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, improve residents' health, create good paying local jobs, and help advance racial equity. It's a partnership of the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, Elevate, Emerald Cities Collaborative, and HR&A advisors. R2E2 will offer guidance on energy upgrade financing models, economic inclusion, navigating the complexities of the affordable housing sector, engaging with community-based organizations to ensure proposals reflect community needs. And the People's Climate Innovation Center is advising R2E2 on centering climate equity in the project and its outcomes on facilitating community-driven planning processes. I believe we're going to have a poll at this time. All right. So the learning objectives of this presentation, by the end of this webinar, you should be able to define the term retrofit, recognize the general areas covered in a building retrofit, identify the stakeholders involved, explain the need for focusing retrofits in affordable housing, detail the energy benefits and non-energy benefits resulting from a retrofit, describe who receives the benefits and their impact, and use the concepts presented to begin researching and developing a retrofit program in your area. So what is a retrofit? A retrofit is an addition or update of technology from an older system. In comparison to a remodel, a retrofit focuses on technology rather than the aesthetics. So a remodel's goal is to make a home more attractive, change decor and finishes, and you work with an interior designer, a general contractor, or specialty trades, as opposed to a retrofit, which the goal is to make a building more efficient or perform better. You're usually updating HVAC systems, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, plumbing, the building envelope, insulation, air sealing, windows, and ventilation. So this is usually completed by mechanical, electrical, plumbing, engineering contractors, general contractors, and specialty trades. So what areas are included in a retrofit? The baseline things that are included would be energy efficiency, water conservation, health and safety improvements, electrification of the home, switching away from fossil fuels, or adding renewable energy to your home. Other opportunities that you could explore are having smart capabilities with smart devices and building automation, having energy storage for management of renewable energy, or having a backup in case of power outages, or adding EV charging if you have an electric vehicle. I think we're going to have another poll at this point. All right. Move on. So what is included in energy efficiency? Energy efficiency is tuning up or repairing or replacing heating and cooling systems, hot water systems, trying to improve or reduce air leakage and improve the building envelope that keeps cold air or warm air in or out based on the temperature outside, switching out to more efficient lighting, changing out your appliances to more efficient appliances, and changing out your windows for more efficient windows. You can see the graphic on the right shows some of the large energy users in most affordable housing units. So what is included in water conservation is the tune-up, repair, or replacement of hot water systems, plumbing, if you have leaks, ensure you're not losing water and pressure. Fixtures, toilets, showers, irrigation systems, and stormwater management systems. To the right, you'll also see a breakout of common distribution of where people spend their money on water. Fun fact, high efficiency toilets pay themselves back in under a year. Keep that in mind. So what is included in renewable energy? Systems like solar, geothermal, battery storage are typical systems that would be paired with housing. And as you can see in this chart to the right, multifamily housing compared to other commercial buildings has a pretty low adoption rate of renewable energy on site. There's a lot of complications, and we may get into some of that later. So what is included in health and safety? Combustion safety, making sure you're not leaking gases into your home. Ventilation, making sure that there's air exchanges and fresh air is coming from outside and being exchanged, so you're breathing fresh oxygen. Pest management, to ensure things aren't, critters aren't getting in and causing all sorts of damage inside your home. Active design, making sure that homes adapt to people as they age or have any sort of disabilities that need to accommodate them so they can stay in their home. Or toxin abatement like lead, mold, asbestos, or radon. There's lots of sources of indoor pollutants that could prop up from different issues in the home, such as if a bathroom doesn't have really good ventilation, the moisture can stay in and create mold and mildew and odors, or things like having not good ventilation of your home to move air outside can cause particulate matter to aggregate inside and contribute to lower indoor air quality, such as running a gas stove or having any sort of smoke or combustion happening in the home. So what types of buildings can be retrofitted? Well, all types, residential, commercial, industrial, public facilities. Really the term covers any type of facility where you're upgrading the equipment and appliances or building systems to make them more efficient. We're talking with a focus on affordable housing today. We're really talking about public housing, subsidized housing, or naturally occurring unsubsidized housing that is still affordable for the people who rent it. Important to note that affordability means that both the rent and the cost of the utilities is affordable for its occupants. The sizes can range from everything from single family homes to small apartment buildings to large multifamily complexes or campuses. And there can be a lot of complications in the ownership structure. Some homes are owner occupied, some are renter occupied, or some have complicated structures where the buildings are separate from the land they're on, like a condo or land trust. So why are we focusing on affordable housing? Well, there's a lack of dedicated resources and institutions serving affordable housing. Most utility retrofit programs are best suited for market rate and owner occupied and single family homes. And affordable housing often faces environmental discrimination and injustice in the way that it is zoned and where it's approved to be built. Affordable housing has many constraints on its budgets, whether it's subsidized or naturally occurring, and trying to maintain a low rent. And that can lead to deferred maintenance of energy and water systems that can cause damage, health and safety issues, or other costs that can make it difficult to justify investing in energy efficiency. And in many places, there is a diminishing stock of affordable housing. So how can retrofits be undertaken? By building owners for an individual building. Building owners who own multiple buildings can look across their portfolio and make improvements. Governments, utilities, nonprofits, community-based organizations for community buildings like senior centers, recreational facilities, libraries. By governments, utilities, and nonprofits and community-based organizations for multiple buildings in a region. How are they funded? Typically, the owner or investor needs to provide some capital. They may want to get some sort of loan, either a subsidized loan from the government, use utility incentives, or get private loans from a lender. And also some have access to getting grant funds or subsidies or other types of incentives through existing local programs, federal programs. So who are the stakeholders in affordable housing retrofits? It is the building owners, the property managers, government agencies that get involved in affordable housing and regulation of energy, philanthropic, community or private funders, nonprofits, community-based organizations, and the renters and community residents. So how can buildings upgrades benefit underserved communities? They can increase climate resilience and reduce greenhouse gas emission and air pollution. They can lessen reliance on fossil fuels equipment in the home, enable families to maintain safe indoor temperatures during extreme weather, which can help prevent them from getting sick. Improving health, comfort, and safety, reducing their exposure to mold, moisture, and lead, improving indoor air quality, lowering the risk of gas leaks or explosions, reducing ER visits and missed days of work and school-related to asthma and other respiratory diseases, and improving mental health. Another benefit is increased affordability, reducing energy bills for people with low and moderate incomes. As I mentioned earlier, that's rent plus the cost of utilities determines whether something is affordable as a household. So improving the long-term housing affordability and stability is important, and freeing up household budgets for essential needs such as food and medicine. Another benefit is strengthening the local economy, something that Delmar was touching on earlier, promoting equity via women and minority-owned businesses, business development and inclusive procurement to deliver these services, and creating local jobs through job training to be able to know how to install and service energy efficient equipment. Another very important benefit is promoting racial equity and ensuring retrofits benefit BIPOC communities that have been excluded from past policies, address frontline community priorities, and center community leadership, especially voices from BIPOC renters and marginalized communities. We're going to have another poll at this point. Thank you. Okay, so what are some of the challenges? It can be very difficult to acquire funding for retrofits. Lenders do not normally understand how to underwrite the fact that you might be saving energy, and that's actually a source of revenue to you. You're more financially stable, so it can be difficult to justify that to a traditional lender. Identifying and selecting contractors who understand the technology and making sure that they know how it works and how to optimize the system so that you are achieving that energy efficiency, you are saving money in the end. There can be competing priorities of the stakeholders, the renters, the owners, the lenders. This can often be cited between the renters and owners as a split incentive. And just trying to figure out how you can solve for that so that the occupants can benefit and the building owner isn't compromising their ability to make a return on their investment in their building. Existing building conditions, which must be addressed before retrofits can be safely installed. These are these health and safety issues, structural issues, anything that needs to be remediated, like lead or mold or asbestos, that can cause a lot of upfront costs before you can even consider improving the systems. Existing building systems require significant upgrades or modifications. If it's really a really old building with really old systems, it may not lend itself well to adopting some of the newer advanced technology, and that can cause some significant challenges or added costs. Also, educating tenants on best practices and shifting their behavior. As much as this technology is more efficient, the way that you use it and manage it in your life and with your behavior can really maximize the cost savings that can be achieved. And if you do things that are at odds with the idea of having more efficient systems, like heat your home with your window open on a cold day, you're kind of not achieving the savings that you should. So also climate, existing building issues, and required behavior change can complicate system design and equipment selection. So I've heard plenty of stories of programs that have installed like a Nest thermostat in a elderly care facility, and people can't figure out how to use it, and they wind up taking them out and putting in the old types of systems again. You got to work with the tenants and make sure that they understand what the technology is, how to use it, and really make sure that they benefit from it. All right. So I'd like to talk about a case study to give a more tangible example of what this can look like. In this case, this is a project from Madison, Wisconsin, with an owner called Commonwealth Development. This was a project that Elevate worked on with a local partner in Madison called Sustain Dane and Renew Wisconsin, and was funded in part by the USDN, the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. The goal was to electrify a 4-unit affordable multifamily building and change out their existing heating systems to air source heat pumps and weatherize the building to make sure it had a really tight building shell and maximize the efficiency of the new heating system. Overall, the resilience benefits to the occupants was that it reduced overall operating costs and created a $0 bill for heating and cooling for each residential unit, because they master metered the building and eliminated the need for the tenants to pay for it. So the environmental benefits was that it converted gas to electric heating, and that resulted in a 70% reduction in carbon emissions, which is 4.2 tons annually and 63 tons over the 15-year lifetime of those heat pumps. There was a solar system installed, which is a 20 kilowatt solar array, which offset the entire centralized heating and cooling system load. So solar became the primary fuel for heating and cooling the home, which resulted in that massive reduction in costs to the tenants. So overall, there was a turnkey cost of $135,000, and there were that resulted in a $425 annual operating cost reduction, and tenants received a little over $1,100 in energy savings per year. So how that program was delivered was through, or project was delivered was through a program called an Efficiency Navigator, which is a one-stop shop approach to helping owners of small, medium-sized multifamily housing to become more efficient and resilient while reducing their operating costs and keeping their units as affordable. So that program's goal was housing resilience and fostering innovation to help preserve affordable workforce housing. Equity, addressing the intersection of environmental, social, and economic justice for cost-burdened residents, and climate change, reducing energy and water demand in our existing building stock to tackle the effects of climate change. So that's the programmatic structure in which this retrofit was delivered for that project. To date, the Wisconsin Efficiency Navigator, which was funded in part by the Wisconsin Public Service Commission, has assessed 86 units. It has an average annual energy savings of 21% for those units. Has reduced costs by 11% for residents, and is reduced over 26,000 tons of greenhouse gas, which is equivalent to over 5,700 cars driven for a year. So 33 different energy conservation measures at 10 properties that add up to those 86 units that were served, and almost 500 MMBTUs of energy savings, which is equivalent of just eliminating the energy use of 14 of those apartments. And overall, $5,800 in annual cost savings. So a pretty significant impact for the people who live there, and really great environmental impact at the same time. So really solving for that intersection of environmental benefits and equity benefits for the tenants at the same time. So I'd like to talk about building retrofit best practices. Delmar touched on this. We got to be inclusive and bring people together to talk about the process and make sure that everybody's on the same page. You should include tenants and occupants, residents as a primary stakeholder in the process, and center efforts around equity and inclusion. You really need to look beyond the energy and cost savings when setting these goals. because in the end, you're trying to make for a better living environment for the occupants, a healthier, safer environment. You're reducing their costs. And overall, through programmatic structures like I just talked about, you can find ways to braid funding together and bring in different resources so that the owner of the building is doing something that is cost effective for them and also benefits their tenants at the same time. So in summary, retrofit aims to increase the efficiency of a building. Building retrofits address many systems within a building, including but not limited to energy, water, renewable energy, health and safety. The stakeholders in funding, planning, and implementation of retrofits are generally property owners, governmental agencies, utilities, nonprofits, private funders, and community-based organizations. And for a variety of reasons, including racial and economic inequity, the need for retrofits in affordable housing properties should be a focus of retrofit programs. A variety of benefits, both energy and non-energy, are derived from retrofits, which positively impact stakeholders from individual renters to the entire planet. So I think we have our last poll as part of this presentation. Thank you very much. I believe our presentations will be provided to folks afterwards, but we do have some resources and places to look for more information about affordable multifamily retrofits and the impacts they can make from some great organizations such as ACEEE, USDN, and the U.S. Department of Energy, and the Building Energy Exchange. So thank you very much to our funders, the Rockefeller Foundation, JP Morgan Chase, JPB Foundation, and Wells Fargo. And thank you to our partners, ACEEE, HRNA, Emerald Cities, and our strategic advisor, People's Climate Innovation Center. So I think now we can move to Q&A if we have time.
Thank you, Henry. During the Q&A, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please submit them using the chat on the right. Please feel free to upvote any questions that you find particularly interesting and would like answered. I will pass it on to Henry and Mary Jo.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mary Jo. I'm going to be feeding your questions that I've been logging from the chat. We have a lot of them. I don't know that we'll have time for all of them, but we will do our best effort to get through as many as we can and try and answer any remaining ones after the presentation. So first question, whose responsibility will be the EV charging retrofits? Would that be the city, the state, or the utility?
That is a great question. If you integrate EV charging into a retrofit program, I think a big assumption you're making is that, especially for affordable housing, do your tenants actually drive EVs? Do they have access to EVs? Are there affordable electric vehicle options for them? And does that necessitate a need to add EV charging so that you're being equitable in trying to provide them a place to park their car safely and charge it? So I think depending on the situation of the building and the building owner and the tenants, you need to determine whether that was a viable investment that should be made, and if there are any programs out there that can help subsidize that cost, because those exist in several markets for sure.
Next question, for those, and I think this is more to, attendees as well, for those who have rebate programs, what appliances do many of you rebate?
Typically, in a lot of utility programs provide rebates for things that improve energy efficiency. Many of them cannot pay for a switch between a natural gas and electric appliance for various reasons. What we do have coming down the line right now from the federal government and the DOE are the Inflation Reduction Act incentives, which can provide rebates for things like heat pumps, solar, and other energy efficient technologies. So I think one of the goals of the programs that we want you to consider is how do you start to pull in the different rebates from different sources and make those available to the target housing stock that you're trying to deliver them to.
Okay, next question. I think this was relatively straightforward. What is the high efficiency toilet?
Yeah, so toilets are measured by gallons per flush. And so a high efficiency toilet uses fewer gallons per flush. The standard toilet, I think, is like 3.5 gallons or 3.2 gallons per flush. And some high efficiency toilets can be down to, I think, like 0.7 or so. I might be overstating that, but I have seen them in action. An important thing to note about high efficiency toilets is that user experience is very important, and people want a toilet that works. So even if it's a high efficiency, you got to make sure that it's one that works well.
Yeah. Next question. Do you have any resources on using passive solar in homes? I know there's a lot of extraction involved in solar panel and battery manufacturing, so want to limit as much as possible.
Yeah, I think there are plenty of resources out there around using passive solar in homes, either as like solar thermal, where you're heating some sort of glycol system or something like that to provide water heating, or if you're trying to gear your home itself to maximize the use of solar that hits it, whether you can adjust your how you're getting solar gain on your household or eliminating solar gain by having shading or trees or other types of kind of protection from solar hitting your household.
Okay, next one specific to affordable and low and moderate income retrofits. We often find that LMI neighborhoods have trouble funding retrofits. Are there any specific funding sources for LMI residents to tap into? Redlining has made home values less, thus excluding them from traditional funding pathways.
Yeah, this is definitely a big issue when we're talking about investing in all of this fancy energy efficient equipment and solar. The cost starts to rack up, and you're thinking about that in relation to the value of the home. I think it's generally accepted that we'd expect in LMI communities that there's some level of subsidy or grants that are made available, and we wouldn't be expecting people to finance these types of upgrades, especially if there wasn't a clear reduction in their costs. As Delmar mentioned earlier, we need to solve for the equity and climate issues at the same time, which means we can't reduce greenhouse gas emissions just and then expect people to pay higher bills. So I think that's part of the overall program design that people need to consider is your baseline that you at least don't increase people's costs? Are you going to give them some sort of subsidy? Or are you going to give them access to lower cost financing that has lower thresholds for things like credit scores, or eliminates the requirements for people to have credit scores, which is a huge equity issue. So I think it's all part of as we progress through this summit and hear about a lot more components of what a really effective program could be, that we can start figuring out what might work to best serve these communities.
Excellent. Next question. Renters are usually left out in energy efficiency programs for various reasons. What are some solutions to assure that renters have access?
Yes, so there are some things that renters can do, and there's lots of like direct install programs where you can change out light bulbs and add weather stripping, small improvements. But changing out the big systems, that's where really having a focus on working with the owner and the tenant at the same time. You can try and work towards making an offering with a program that would be advantageous to both and convince a building owner to move forward with improving the systems. Because in the end, there's a lot of risk with providing a house or a home to someone that is not energy efficient, that is not healthy, that has inconsistent heating and cooling, because that compromises the renter's ability to pay their bills and makes them want to leave. So if you have a lot of turnover in rental housing, that's a cost to the owner that they should see. It's better to try and provide good housing to their tenants and ensure that their tenant wants to stay there. And I think that a lot of that comes with kind of some of this negotiation and bringing them together to talk about what improvements would make the most sense and have a dual benefit. But it's not easy.
Okay, next question. When retrofitting naturally occurring affordable housing, how can we best maintain affordability and not displace existing residents?
Yeah, I noticed in that there's in parentheses there a non-deed restricted affordable housing. So I was going to point definitely to utilizing some tools like deed restrictions called affordability covenants, which can be used to lock a rental unit into a certain, like it can't rent past a certain price based on area median income. That's a great tool. You can get voluntary agreements. You can get a signed contract with if you're providing incentives that if they raise the rents after you provide these incentives, that they have to pay that back. So have some sort of penalty in place. But yeah, it is complicated on how you can say we want to invest in what is in a household that houses someone who might have low to moderate income, but is owned by somebody who does not have low to moderate income, because in the end, that investment benefits the owner. So you have to find some tool and enforce it to ensure that you're keeping that rent affordable for the occupant. And that's very important, enforcing it. Or else, you know, you're kind of not really solving the problem that you're set out to solve.
Right. I think that's, something that another person put in the question list is, how do you deal with the split incentive of the owner has the cost of certain upgrades and the renter benefit?
Yeah, it is a problem that plagues energy efficiency programs and all sorts of investments that would be good for the tenants, that if the owner doesn't see a return on investment for themselves, or they don't see a benefit in doing anything any more than the bare minimum meeting code or meeting any sort of local regulations, you have to provide some sort of an incentive. And if you unless they want to do it out of the goodness of their heart, there are definitely landlords out there that will do that. But these are investment properties to them. And so you have to find ways that if you want them to take certain actions, you can provide them incentives, you can provide them services, hand-holding through the process to make sure that they stay on track to move forward and make those improvements. But you also need some sort of guarantee that they're going to maintain the affordability of that unit, or you could just basically pay for them to gentrify themselves. We don't want to see that happen. So it's a very difficult problem to fix, but there are some good programmatic structures out there that can fix that. Even things like green leases where tenants and owners can share in the cost of upgrades if they're really interested in making them move forward. Yeah, other like the one-stop shop approach that we pointed to, where you have that hand holding, but also provide grants and incentives and get some form of agreement to ensure that the rents don't go up.
I do want to address, there were some questions about our case studies. And this is the problem of having one person create slides and another person present, but just wanted to do my little correction on the Commonwealth case study that was presented, in that is still in the design stage. There have not been any retrofits done. The numbers that were provided for that case study are just estimates based on what, the assessments that were done and the opportunities that were identified for that. There are a lot of questions about, getting more information from those two programs. So, we'll do our best to try and disseminate information. We do have a really great paper that was written up on those programs. So we will make sure we provide that to everyone. Question is anyone measuring specific health benefits in the retrofit building?
So some programs are attempting to measure health outcomes. This takes long-term tracking to ensure that you're making a change, and the intention is to improve occupant health, but then you need to follow up and make sure that, things like hospital visits are going down, or sick days are being reduced, or whatever your intended health impacts are, you need to make sure that you're measuring them and not just assuming that they take place. Because you can't just make an improvement and expect that the impact will happen. You need to follow up. But yes, I think that there's a lot of great synergy between making energy efficiency improvements and improving occupant health and safety, especially around improving indoor air quality. So hopefully we can also integrate those co-benefits and try and make sure it's part of the overall program designs that any of you come up with.
Okay, another question. Are there any key measures, especially regarding health and safety, you would particularly recommend that would keep us on the map and ahead of the game?
Yeah, I don't know if I'll get in trouble for saying this. Remove combustion from your home. I think that's a big one. Getting the combustion of natural gas out of your home can improve indoor air quality. Also making sure you have really effective ventilation so that you can control the air that comes in and make sure that the air in your home gets exchanged and moved out. A home breathes. It needs to bring air in, it needs to let air out. But being able to control that can ensure it can be filtered, or you can control where it's coming from and also expelled from the household. So if you do have indoor air particulates, or if you have a really tight building shell and just not a lot of air can get in naturally through cracks and spaces in between the walls and the rim of your building and through the attic, you have to exchange the air or it gets stale and the amount of oxygen in your house is reduced. So I think that's something that we all need to be taking a lot of care with, is ensuring that we can make a super energy efficient building that controls indoor air quality, but we've got to make sure that we're focusing on the quality of that air continuing to be very good for the occupant.
Okay. Another question related to that is, how do you measure occupant health and safety?
Occupant health and safety. So some of the measures on occupant health and safety is like the number of sick days that people experience in a year, days of missed work, days of missed school, asthma morbidity or other cardiovascular respiratory diseases, and how many times people are hospitalized for those things. And otherwise, it can be things like injuries in the household if the home has structural issues or like any sort of hazards that could injure somebody. These are things that you can measure to improve occupant health and safety.
Okay.
Yep.
And somebody wanted to know also, besides the health and safety, how are the economic benefits monitored?
Yeah, the best way to measure or monitor the economic benefits is to follow up and ask people to see if their bills have gone down. Getting copies to measure what happened the year before and the year after, and see if there is a significant reduction in their utility costs. It's important to do that and verify. As I said, we can install stuff and we have a theory that it's going to save money, but unless the systems are used properly and the occupants know how to use them and know other tips and tricks to ensure that they improve the overall efficiency with their behavior, they may not realize the full benefits and may not see the cost reductions that we would expect. So it's following up. It's a common theme here.
Yeah. And here's a question, something we come across with our own programs in doing retrofits on aging stock. How do you address the other issues that come with an aging affordable housing stock in order to do retrofit?
This is a very sticky issue because a lot of buildings weren't built to stand for 70, 80, 100 plus years. That was never the intention of them, or at least it's not what how they designed it, was to say this building's going to stand for 100 years. So buildings go through a cycle of reinvestment over time. If they're subsidized, they have to go through reinvestment over time. But when homes were built before codes were in place in the 60s, there's a lot of variability that might not make sense with like how you want to upgrade that building and make it very energy efficient. So you might need to go through what's called like a gut rehab and really tear things down to the studs and rebuild on the core skeleton of that building, a much more efficient building shell and better systems. That's very expensive. So finding ways to retrofit a building that is older, I know there's lots of resources out there on case studies of how to like retrofit historic buildings and things like that. But you're dealing with really old systems, like old boiler systems with the radiators and stuff like that. It's very hard to replace those with super energy efficient electrical systems. But we do have a lot of great advances in, especially in heating and cooling technology with heat pumps that can kind of get around some of those issues with older systems. But it's not easy.
Okay. How do you decide which areas to undertake in a retrofit?
I think we always start with the core of health and safety, and you really want to make sure that you're starting with that foundation of a healthy and safe home, remediate any issues with lead, mold, asbestos, and then go from there. And that's, as I mentioned earlier, can present some pretty significant upfront costs to just get to that point. But before, I think that's kind of the baseline. After that, I think it's generally the best practice that you kind of want to rip the Band-Aid off if you can and do as much as possible at once, especially if you're going to open up walls or if you're going to replace your roof. These types of actions can be paired with other improvements that might really help. Like I saw in the chat, somebody mentioned knob and tube wiring. Like if I'm going to replace all the knob and tube wiring in my house, old style electrical wiring, and I'm going to be opening up walls and replacing all this stuff, I should probably also consider putting in insulation and air sealing around my house and making, while I've got people poking in all these places in my home and opening things up, get other things done that make sense to do at the same time, because it'll just cost more money to go back and do it later. So thinking ahead about your total plan and the vision for your improvements that you want to make, and then figuring out, if I'm going to do this, should I also do this at the same time? That, of course, is easier said than done because people need access to incentives and capital and just the money to be able to make those improvements. And that can be its own challenge.
Okay, here's the question getting to the core of some things going on right now. How scalable are affordable housing retrofits? Are there common housing stock designs that can be planned for or purchased? Or does each project tend to be custom?
I wish it were cookie cutter, but there actually are many of the processes that we go through in just figuring out how to create a retrofit program is to do a building stock analysis. There may be really common building stock. When there are big construction booms in communities that have happened at certain times, you wind up with pretty consistent building stock in certain areas of towns, based on the decade it was built in and the climate that you're in. So you can find those opportunities where you can improve the efficiency of the assessment process, know the common improvements better, cultivate a contractor network that is more accustomed and understands the buildings and the systems that can work for them. It is possible, but there's no telling who might have made some strange retrofit or remodel at some point to that housing. And so there will always be surprises and variability, but you can lock into some pretty standard approaches based on your common building stock.
Question, are there health insurance providers or foundations that are actually monetizing health improvements from energy efficiency measures?
There are some programs that have provided funding for projects that improve health and safety through health systems. I think there's a great example of Kaiser Permanente, the hospital system in California, built affordable housing that was highly efficient and very, very carefully controlled the indoor air quality of the building, because they could put income limited residents who had cardiovascular respiratory issues in that housing and guarantee better health outcomes for them. That's a pretty on the nose example that these health and safety issues and risks can be monetized in the form of reducing costs to the healthcare system. It's just, how do we get them to pay? That's the difficult piece of it, is figuring out how you get their money and incentives into the mix. Stephanie? Are you giving us notice?
Yes, we're at time.
Okay.
Yeah. So
All
feel
right.
free to finalize your thoughts and then we can move on.
Well, just thank you all for joining us. We appreciate all the questions. There's an obvious interest in this. I wish we had time to answer them all, but hopefully you'll learn a lot more throughout the process of this summit. So thank you very much.